Welcome to Exploring A Course in Miracles. I'm Robert Perry here with Emily Perry, and today our guest is Jon Mundy. Jon Mundy will be known to many people in the Course community. He's a longtime teacher of A Course in Miracles and one of the very first people to ever receive the Course. Jon, for years, was a Methodist minister, but he's been publishing Miracles Magazine for just about 40 years now. He just said.
Exactly 40 years.
Exactly 40 years. I remember the prequel of Mustard Seed, which
Wow, that's
was
pretty
like
good.
early 80s, I think. Uh,
85.
okay.
Yeah,
He co-founded Interfaith Fellowship, which was basically a course-inspired church that for many years had services in New York City. He co-founded the New Seminary and currently directs All Faith Seminary, their ACIM studies program. I've known Jon for over 30 years. We met outside of Charlottesville at that conference in May of 92, I believe.
wow.
But we have never had Jon on the program. So today we are rectifying that. Specifically, we've asked Jon to share with us about his experiences with the Scribe of A Course in Miracles, Helen Schucman. I suspect that there are not all that many course students left who knew Helen, but Jon knew Helen well. So, first, welcome, Jon. Great to have you
Okay.
here.
Right. Okay.
It seems logical to start at the beginning. Can you maybe tell
Oh,
us how you met Helen, what led up to that?
sure. Um, what led up to it was our original meeting was in 1973 at a conference sponsored by an organization called Spiritual Frontiers Fellowship,
Hmm.
where Hugh Lynn Casey, Edgar Casey's son, was the keynote speaker. And that same organization had just published a book that I had written called Learning to Die, which was really kind of a collection of my funeral sermons, actually. I was doing so, while I was working as a Methodist minister, I was at a church that was dying. I mean, literally in terms of older people. And so I spent a lot of time working on that. And I would try to be original with each of the things that I did. So it was hard being original time after time again. But anyhow, so it had mounted up into a book, and I mentioned to somebody who was one of the authorities or directors at the All Faith Seminary, not All Faith Seminaries. Let me get my organization, uh, Spiritual Frontiers Fellowship, about this, and they said, "Well, send it to us. We might like to publish it." So they did. So that meant that I was then at this conference doing a workshop, and I was teaching classes at the time at the New School. The main topic I had was consciousness expansion and religious experience. That was my go-to class in terms of the ones that was the largest. And so that's what I was talking about. I was working on with John Lilly. I don't know who John, you know who John Lilly was?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Oh, you do? Okay, good.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
do- talking to dolphins and
Right.
all
Yeah. Interesting
communicating.
character.
He was. He was quite an interesting. I sponsored a workshop, a weekend by him actually, for Spiritual Frontiers Fellowship here in New York, and like 72, something I think 72 would have been what it was. Anyhow, so I was really into that. So that was what I did. Well, lo and behold, unbeknownst to me, two of the people who were sitting in my workshop were Helen Schucman and Bill Thetford. Now, I
Hmm.
had no idea. I mean, I'm a 29-year-old cocky PhD student, and I think I know something. And if I had known who was sitting there listening to me, I don't know. I'm glad I didn't know. Um, so I have a picture. They're not in the picture, but there's a picture of doing that presentation.
Hmm.
So we were introduced at the end of that. And I remember Helen is, this short little woman with frizzy hair and big glasses, and They told me that she had written, I don't know whether they said A Course in Miracles or not. I don't remember. I don't think they said A Course in Miracles. I think they said something like an inspirational work, right? And I remember looking at Helen and thinking, isn't that sweet? This little old lady wrote an inspirational book. It's probably got some nice prayers in it. It does. Has some very, God, the prayers are the highest of quality. But that was our first meeting at that particular point. So then in 1974, I wrote a letter which got published in the Journal of Transpersonal Psychology, expressing interest in being in contact with anybody who was working in the fields of psychotherapy and spirituality, because I was doing a dissertation on that at the time. And Bill saw my letter, and he told Helen that he thought it was a call for her to complete the writing of the psychotherapy pamphlet. So she had started the psychotherapy pamphlet. Of course, Ken and Bill were both after her, finish this. We want to see what this says, right? But when Ken got it, he thought it was going to be something different. He said, well, this is just like the course. He's like, well, yeah, what were you expecting? Anyhow, so then Helen called me in April of 75, so a little over 50 years ago, and reminded me about our having met, and said she had something for me. And I didn't know what she was talking about. Now, interestingly enough, we lived very close to each other. And she lived on East 17th Street, directly across the street from Ken. Ken deliberately got an apartment directly across the street from Helen to make it easy for them to get together and dialogue. And they didn't have to travel to get together, right? In fact, I only saw Helen in Ken's apartment. I never saw her in her own apartment. Whenever we get together, as my understanding that Louis, Helen's husband, was a bit of a pack rat, and there were copies of the New York Times all over the place and stuff like that. So I guess she preferred to meet me at Ken's place. Ken would just make himself scarce at the time. He had so much to do anyhow.
By
Pardon?
chance, do you remember her address by chance? Like the
No,
cross street
I
or
remember the block. The block
oh,
is
the block.
the first block off of Park Avenue and 17th Street. It's funny you ask, because once when I was giving a lecture about that, I mentioned the fact that where it was. And one of my students after class insisted to take me, that I should take her rather, and to show her the building. And I said, it's just a building, But I did. I took her to her. Well, there's the building right there. That's just an apartment building in New York City, right? But anyhow, so we met. It was on a Sunday evening. I remember. I think it was April 20th. I'm pretty sure that because I looked at that calendar I knew it was on a Sunday evening. There's only four choices, And I think I'd done my taxes, so it was a week after. And so Helen and Ken sat on Ken's little daybed, and Bill was there, and also Benedict Rochelle was there, Father Benedict Rochelle. He had come along to sort of see how they were going to present the course to a neophyte. And so Helen just told me about the course, how it come into existence, how it affected the other people who were there in the room, and gave me a copy of, at that point, the psychotherapy pamphlet. That's all. Just the psychotherapy pamphlet to start with. I did have a
Is
copy.
this,
Go ahead.
John, sorry, was the pamphlet the completed one or the halfway done one?
No, I think it was done. She waited to complete that. It actually, when Ken and Bill encouraged her to finish it so she could give me the finished copy.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. And it was just Xerox pages. It wasn't a booklet yet.
Yeah.
So I actually remember walking home that night thinking that maybe the most important thing that ever had happened to me just had happened. but I didn't know what it was. And it took a while for me to get into it because I was very busy. I was doing doctoral studies. I was teaching a pretty full load at the New School University, and I had taken care of a church in Brooklyn, all three at the same time. And when I wasn't doing all those things, I was trying to have some relationships.
At the time, weren't you living in the apartment building where Marianne Williamson lived?
The answer to that is yes and no. That's so part-time. So the yes and no is that in a previous course that I had taught in this school, I met a woman named Edie Cadenhead. Edie was a gorgeous, petite, blonde, one that stars As the World Turns, a soap opera, right? And she owned a brownstone in the Upper West Side on 89th Street, right? And they rented out apartments in there. There's one in front. One was to Bruce Gregory, who became friends as well, right? And then a couple more. But then she also rented out a bedroom in her part of the apartment so that they could pay the mortgage on the thing, right? Well, I started living with her 6 days a week. Now, when I say 6 days a week, I still had this place on 19th Street, inside a General Theological Seminary is where it was. And so on Sundays, I would go back to my place at General Theological, which was 19th, between 19th and 20th Street. But the rest of the time, yes, I was with Edie. And so one day I go home and Edie tells me I rented out the spare bedroom today to a young woman named Marianne Williamson, who's trying to make it as a nightclub singer here in New York. So that was pre-court. That was 72 and 73, right? Now I'm talking about 75 when I'm meeting Helen. So yeah, it's really sort of interesting how
Isn't it?
these overlaps kind of overlaps the overlaps, and here we were in a city of several million people. So Marianne and I would sit in the morning and have coffee together and talk about these classes I was teaching, and she would ask all these interesting questions about the classes, and we would go to watch her sing at a nightclub in Greenwich Village. And Jeff Olmsted,
That's
who was later the music director at our church, was playing the piano. I had no idea, you know.
that's so interesting. I didn't mean to distract you
No,
from
no, it's all right.
the
But
Helen
yeah,
track,
yeah,
but
yeah. Well,
yeah,
we'll go
it's
back to Helen now. So we'll go back to Helen. But you're right in terms of the overlaps are amazing. Okay, back to Helen. So that was in Ken's apartment. I have to say a word about Ken's apartment because it was the most Spartan thing he'd ever seen. It was almost bare. Ken was getting ready to go off to Israel to live in a monastery prior to this, and he had gotten rid of almost everything. He got even his clarinet, I think, even that he dispensed with, so he could not have too much luggage to take with him. I remember going into the bathroom and looking and thinking there was a toothbrush and a towel. And, it's just like, how Spartan can you get? you know. Uh, but so Helen just told me, and Ken added a little bit as well, not much. Bill added a little bit as well. Benedict Rochelle didn't say anything. At the end of that time, it was agreed that Ken and I would get together again for some more conversation. And Helen also said that if I would like to speak to her some more, that we could get together and do that. All right. And gave me her phone number. And at that time, I I was having trouble with a woman I had dated and didn't call back. And so it was really becoming quite a difficult situation. She showed up at the door at General Theological where I was staying. I had an office apartment there. And when the guard at the door told her I wasn't in, she picked a cup of coffee out of his desk and threw it on him. Right. And she called me at 2 o'clock at night. She would call at 2 o'clock just to wake me up, just to, just to disturb me. And she was furious. And the top of it all was one day when we came out of my office apartment at General Theological, she was waiting in the hallway. And she physically attacked this other woman, right? And I was able to constrain her so nothing happened. And I threw my keys to Judy, the other lady, and she ran out of the building and went and locked herself in the car. So nothing happened, no damage, but that was a bit much. I mean, I thought she'd actually physically attack someone. And I called Helen. I said, help, I mean, I need to talk to somebody, right? And she had said, call me if you want to talk. She said, come see me. So I went to see her at Ken's apartment. And I had only been there for a few minutes and it was interesting, whenever I would meet with her, we would sit kind of really close to each other. I could side by side, not in two separate chairs, but very close, right? And I told her about what had happened with this woman. And by the way, there was never any psychotherapy or anything like that with Helen. She would just tell me what to do. This is what you should do, period. Okay? And she reached, I remember she tapped my knee. She tapped my knee and she said, this woman needs your help. The next time she calls you, answer the phone, you talk to her. That night she called, all right, 2 o'clock in the morning. I get up and answer the phone. And we talked until, I remember the sun was coming up. The light was beginning to come in the window, right? And we worked it out. She is still a friend to this day. All right.
Wow.
Now, 50 years later, we're still in dialogue. Not often, but we're friends. We've been in some of the same social circles, and she always calls me on my birthday, and I make it a point to call her because I know she would like that, so I do. And so it just was kind of remarkable how that all happened. And she just needed my forgiveness. I mean, we need to have that engagement. Huh? So that was one tale. I'll tell you about another time. So, by the way, Helen was always available by phone, and I would usually if there was any conversation that was by phone, I didn't have to go physically to see. So this is now I'm up to 77. Okay. And there's another lady. And this time it's different because I'm in love. Tables are turned. All right, well, she's in love too. We're both in love. But there's a problem. And the problem is that she's separated from her husband and she has children. She has 3 children, actually. All right. And an opportunity came up for her to move out of New York with the ex-husband saying, come back, come back, come back, come back, right? And now he's going into another. So I go to see Helen. It's the same situation. It's very, very simple, actually. Because Helen just looked at me and said, or heard both of us and said, she's got to go. She's got to go back. She's got to go back to her husband, right? And so that was a little difficult because I was, letting go of the love this time. And we left there. Funny thing was, after having left home, we were walking through Greenwich Village. This is all very close to Greenwich Village, right? Helen's on 17th 14th Street is where the new school is and where Greenwich Village really starts. And we passed a psychic in a window, you know, all these psychics sitting in the window kind of thing. And this other woman, I won't say her name, said, let's go in and have a reading. And I said, I don't think it doesn't interest me. And she says, come on, let's go in and have a reading. So we went in and we had a reading together. All right. And all of a sudden, the woman who's doing the reading stops. And she looks at me and she says, I need to speak to you privately. And you would go through these beaded curtains into another room. And she looks at me and she says, this woman who's with you, she has to go. I mean, Helen just said that a half hour ago, right? And now, and not so I don't need to have enough confirmation. He has to go. So she did, and she left. And I won't go any further than just to say, I still know who she is and where she is, and we're still in dialogue as well. Even though
That's really interesting,
Huh?
John. I'm curious as to what you said, sort of pulling the thread of what you said about Helen as a counselor, that she was more directive and not so much trying to draw you out and get your thoughts on the situation. She just told it like it
Always.
was.
Bang. This is what you should do. Right? It was like, okay, and I would do it, and she was right. She was always right. She never wasn't right.
And yet you said that she also, I mean, anyone who knew Helen knew that she could be a bit of a pistol, but you've described her as very caring and loving in the conversations that
She
you had with
was.
her and
She
the
was.
counseling that she gave you. Can you say
Yeah.
more about that side of her?
You know, I think she kind of took me under her arm, so to speak. This is somebody which she was trying to help. And like a younger, there was no doubt about Ken being number one son, but kind of another one of a younger, more naive. But I never really saw that other side of Helen. I knew about it. I knew it existed because Ken and Judy would talk about it. And I might add that from what I know, that got worse as time went by. As Helen became kind of ill, to use a better word, then she started disassociating more. And one of the things I really admired about Helen was how she kept herself out of the limelight when it came to the course. She never appeared in public about giving talks on it. She did a radio show, I think, once. So she did like in somebody's living room talking about it. And the other place I would see her is at Judy's. So, but when I would see her at Judy's apartment, then Bill would be there have and other people. Jerry Jampolsky, perhaps, there'd be a reason for us to get together. We all got together when the course was actually handed out. The printed copies were distributed. I remember that very well. All right.
John, did you know Judy through Helen, Bill, and Ken or independently of them?
I knew Judy prior to all of this, which was interesting because Judy and I were both active in parapsychological studies,
Right.
as Spiritual Frontiers was. We were both part of the American Society for Psychical Research. So we both went to their meetings. We're both teaching at the New School. I was at the New School, she was at NYU, but we're teaching similar kinds of classes on extrasensory perception and that kind of stuff that she was doing. And I remember going to her apartment to watch Uri Geller bend spoons. I remember going to her apartment to see the latest in Curlian photography. So whatever was happening in that field, then Helen was, I mean, not Helen, Judy rather, was very involved in that.
Hmm.
And so we knew each other that way. In fact, also, another lady, the woman who was the
John, we need to do a separate podcast about your
no,
girlfriends.
I think not. I think we can stop here. The woman who is the secretary to the president of the American Society for Psychical Research and I, Vera Felder, we had a relationship. And that was, I must add, one of the best relationships I ever had in my life. And that continued until she passed. But I mean, as friends, we were more than friends for a while. But this is this is what it was. It was what it was. She was much older than I am. I think there was an 11-year difference. I was like 29 to her 41. Right. Or yeah, right. And never talked about marriage. No, what didn't even come up as a topic. We knew that that wasn't where we were going with the relationship. So it made her comfortable. It's not like you get into where is this going? We both knew that someday we'd find something and walk but stay friends, which we did. So
Mm.
she and Judy were very close. She was like Judy's quote best friend. When I say best friend, what I mean by that is, Bill Thetford once made a joke about we're going to go get together with Judy and 100 of her best friends. Because she would have had 100 best friends. There's no doubt about that.
Hmm.
I have a question about Helen's dynamic with other people. So you mentioned that in her relationship with you, she was very caring and you also observed her with Bill and observed her with Ken. What can you say about the way she was with with both of them and if not others?
Well, keep in mind that the only times that I really saw her with them, with the others, were under more formal circumstances, like at Judy's apartment for some reason. And so she was always very normal, sober, nice woman, but this is in a social setting. I don't, so she was just, one thing was interesting was the first conference that was ever held on the course was held at the Barbizon Plaza in New York City in 1978, right? And there were about 300 people there, as I recall. And of course, Judy was there, and Ken was there, and Jerry Jampolsky was there. And did I say Bill was there? And I think Bruce Gregory was there, and a couple of other people, and we all spoke. But it's interesting, there was one person who wasn't there, and that was Helen.
Hmm.
Helen was not at that conference. And there was very good reason. And the reason was that she just did not want people coming up, oh, your book, you're so wonderful, this book that you've done, and oh, thank you so much for having done it. That was no. She wouldn't have wanted to see that at all. I mean, now I might add that she was very interested after it was all over and how did it go and
Hmm.
all that sort of thing. But she herself was not present there.
Hmm.
She stayed out of the limelight. She didn't want to be into the limelight.
Hmm.
Yeah.
John, when she met with you, what do you have the sense that she had an overall goal in her work with you, or was it just responding to each situation as it came up?
No, I think it was just responding to the situation, pretty much. Just whatever was it. There was one psychic thing that interesting happened that in 1977, uh, I had always wanted to have a place outside of the city where I could have workshops and seminars and stuff like a little retreat center. And I found this place in Cortona, New York, And it was like perfect in a lot of ways. It was, over 500 feet off the road, still parking for, you could get 20 cars in there, completely secluded, etc. Um, I made a couple of mistakes zoning wise. I didn't realize I was doing it. I put a sign out front. I didn't,
Hmm.
turned out that was an illegal thing to do. Well, you could have a sign, but it was about a foot and a half by about a foot and a half, you know. I did one that was like 3 foot by 4 foot or something. Right? And I called it, it had a name, it was called High Rock Spring. I called it Transpersonal Center. And I would have Ken. Ken would come there on usually Memorial Day weekends and Labor Day weekends when it wasn't unusual. A lot of cars were going in and out. Anyhow, what happened was I I put it down on this place. And after I put it down, we were talking about it. And Helen said, it's not going to work. And I'm going like, what, you psychic or something? And it was like, what do you mean it's not going to work? Right. And Bill stepped in at that point, and Bill said, leave him alone. It'll be okay. It'll work out all right. And that was an interesting thing that happened, right? So sure enough, with the very first workshop seminar, I got a cease and desist notice from the zoning board. You can't be doing that in this neighborhood, right? So they said, well, you can apply for a variance. And they did. So I applied for a variance. And I didn't realize I was in kind of in Upper Snobsville at this point. Uh, and I had to send notices to everybody that lived within like 3 blocks of me about what was going to be happening there, right? I did that. So there was a hearing in July of 77. And we went to the hearing. It was a very, very, very hot night, and the air conditioner was broken in the room where the hearing was being held, and the windows were nailed shut, so you couldn't open the window. So uh, I was 11th on the docket, and everybody was there. All my neighbors were there, right? Right. As to whether or not they were going to permit this thing, but well, he was out of the way, and it had plenty of room and all that. And so I presented my case, but I lost by a vote of 5-4.
Oh,
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
yikes. Were you
And
able to follow up with Helen and say it actually didn't work?
well, Helen called the next morning. She knew about it. The first phone call I got the next morning was from Helen. How did it go? Did it work? Oh no, you were right. It didn't work. But Bill also turned out to be right in a way because I lived there for 11 years. I did very quiet. I didn't advertise in the community, only in New York City. I kept it pretty small. As I said, I would have Ken twice a year. Labor Day, wouldn't look unusual. The cars are coming and going. And I did a few different events, but they were so quiet that
Mm-hmm.
nobody could even notice hardly. And the good news was I sold the place for $225,000 more than I paid for it.
Hmm.
Uh,
Well,
which yeah.
at least
So
you got your money back and then some.
yeah.
John, did you ever get a sense from Helen about whether or not she was supportive of teachers of the course coming along and sharing its message?
No, I don't know about that one way or the other. I think, we agree. It was inevitable that that was going to be happening. I mean, Helen in the beginning thought this was only for very few people. So they were sort of surprised when it started taking fire and really growing the way that it did grow. Uh, and it was slow kind of in the beginning, you know.
Hmm.
But isn't that, when the truth gets out, the truth gets out. And
Yeah.
it's, I think it's this book I was reading yesterday, that's gonna be another hit. Uh,
Yeah. You can't stop the truth. Go ahead, Robert.
um,
Well, speaking about properties, do you know much about the discussions that Helen, Bill, Ken, and Judy had about them going off to some teaching and healing center, uh, which never obviously materialized? But Ken had written things about that. Judy talks some about a potential property that she was going to get for that purpose.
no, I don't know. I mean, Ken did get Roscoe.
Of course,
I
yeah.
didn't know. Did you ever
Yeah.
go to Roscoe?
You took me there.
Oh, I
Yeah.
didn't.
Yeah, it right after that conference in
Oh, okay.
Virginia. Yeah,
Oh,
so
okay.
I got a tour from Ken and Glory and sat down with the two of them for a
Oh,
conversation.
oh, I think I wasn't part of the conversation though, right?
You weren't there in the room, yeah.
Yeah, I think that I was, yeah.
Go ahead, Emily.
Well, I'm trying to figure out like what would be the next logical thread to pull, but at the same time, I am curious, and I hope this doesn't jump us ahead too far in the story, but you said two things that have been interesting to me about, first of all, Father Groeschel was there when you met Helen and Bill, and also you had mentioned that Helen became more withdrawn as she became ill. And Father Groeschel's story about Helen at the end of her life has gained some traction. And I
No,
think it's been quite damaging
I do
to
too.
the course. And so
I
I'm
agree.
just curious as to whether you had any interaction with Helen towards the end of her life, and if you had the same observations that Father Groeschel had, or where he would have gotten that impression from.
No, I really didn't even see Helen, I would say, during the last year and a half of her life. And she cut off with everybody. The only people that she saw were her husband and the doctors and Ken and Judy, and that was pretty much it. And from what I know, talking to, Ken and Judy at that point, she didn't take care of herself. I mean, she didn't fix her hair and, all those kind of things that were normal in the course of a day. So that could have been upsetting. Rochelle was a funny guy. I spent in 1970, this is interesting, 1979, it's not directly about Helen. Uh, the Foundation for Religion and Mental Health asked me if I would produce some Saturday seminars for them. I'd had some experience doing that for Wainwright House in Rye, New York, and also for Spiritual Frontiers Fellowship. So I got this little part-time job of putting on a couple of conferences for them. And in one of them, I sponsored Ken and Father Benedict Rochelle. And I think, well, one was in the morning and one was in the afternoon. I think Ken was in the morning and Rochelle was in the afternoon. So in the lunch break in between, right? And by the way, this is sort of interesting. It's the first time that I saw when Ken finished his talk and he's coming down the aisle, I am sitting just behind Gloria and slightly to the right, right? And I see Ken and Gloria making eyes. I mean, doing this kind of, you know what I mean by making eyes with each other.
Hmm.
And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Something's happening here. And of course, something did happen here. By the way, I don't think Ken didn't really um, talk to Helen about Gloria. I don't think much or at all. So to my knowledge, I won't go any further than that because I don't know more than that. So,
How much before Ken and Gloria got together was that moment?
well, that was in 79 and Helen died in February 9th, 1981. I remember going to Helen's funeral. Helen's funeral was held at Columbia University. And all I can remember is it was a walnut paneled room. I mean, real walnut, one of those kind of rooms. Very good. And it was one thing Ken gave the eulogy, and it was about a half hour long. And one thing is that he never mentioned A Course in Miracles in that eulogy. And the reason was there were people there, colleagues of Helen's from when she'd been at Columbia as a professor, who still didn't know about the course.
Hmm.
So they weren't privy to that at all, which is sort of interesting. Or maybe they were
That
late.
is interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
And
a
also,
real, go ahead.
Louis was uncomfortable with the course. Is that part of why it wasn't mentioned at her funeral as well?
Who was?
Louis, her husband.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's true. Louis actually asked Ken not to talk about
Hmm.
it. Yeah.
Hmm.
Although I might add, he got very excited when there was an article in the New York Times about Helen and the course. And Louis, oh, look, my wife, she's in the New York Times is his Bible.
Do you, do you remember what Ken said, or if there's a record of his eulogy written somewhere? No?
No, I really don't. Of course, it was all
Yeah.
wonderful because, that was, they had a wonderful relationship, the two of them.
And
Remember,
where is she buried?
she's buried in a Jewish cemetery on Staten Island.
Hmm.
And I remember going, it was a very rainy day, very, not just rainy, but foggy. In fact, it was a story. We go to this cemetery, and I remember there were these iron rod things around some of the graves. It was like something out of a movie, with heavy fog. The iron rods is all you could see around things and where she was buried. I don't know the name of the place or anything like that, and I don't want Ken never wanted people to go,
Hmm.
make an honorarium thing out of it. One of my students did dig it out and go and actually maintained it for a while. Or
Hmm.
Is that right?
and I told Judy about that once, and Judy was happy to hear that it was being maintained. Yeah.
But her funeral wasn't at a church, it was at Columbia University, you said?
Yeah, room at Columbia, yeah.
Well, just to close the loop
Yeah.
with Father
Yeah.
Groeschel, what do you make of? I mean, he had some really negative comments about Helen and the course when it seemed like he was kind of part of the story of the course early on.
Yeah, early on, he turned. He went more, I think when he realized what the course was saying, for one thing, he he was a Catholic. I mean,
Hmm.
he Catholic diehard through and through. And I don't know whether you know, but he got into some trouble himself. Uh, he this is back when there was a lot of information coming out about peace priests who were pedophiles,
Hmm.
and he had some authority in the Catholic Church in New York. And he was not a pedophile himself, let me be clear about that. But he defended some of the guys that were, and he publicly defended uh, some of them. Actually, if you go on to Wikipedia and look up his name, it will talk about that event, about a talk that he gave in Yonkers, New York, that upset a lot of people,
Hmm.
where he defended these priests who turned out they had indeed done what they were accused of. So
Did he actually know that the people he was
I don't
defending
know.
were
He may
guilty?
have falsely defended and just uh,
Yeah, that's what I would be
because
curious.
they were his friends and he liked them and he wanted to support them. I don't know. It's hard
Hmm.
to know what the truth is around that.
Well, while we're on that topic, you hear these days, conspiracy theories about how well, Bill was working for the CIA and the
Oh, I
course
heard
was
that
some kind
before.
of a CIA mind control thing. Now, there's already information out there about Bill's actual relationship with the CIA, the personality assessment system work that was being done.
Well, he did help in the development of that test. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah,
But the fact that that doesn't mean anything.
yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't, but people latch on to,
Yeah.
whatever they want to.
Yes, of course. Well, the ego likes that kind of thing. Look at what's going on currently in politics. The ego is very excited about all this stuff. You know,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
gossip.
mine certainly is agitated about all that stuff.
Well,
Just
yeah.
to be clear for anyone listening who might not be familiar with what's being discussed here, Bill was involved with the CIA, but he was involved in personality assessments, precursors to Myers-Briggs, that kind of thing. And he wasn't involved in MK Ultra, which is a program that is designed to be more mind control. So Bill has no involvement with MK Ultra, despite the fact that it's a prevalent rumor that he had some involvement with that program.
So any final reflections based on your experiences of Helen, John? Anything
Oh
that
no, I
would
guess
be
that's
interesting for course students to know?
yes, that's pretty well. She was a darling, lovely, kind woman. Certainly, that was true in my relationship with her, and many others, I'm sure, as well. She and Ken got along marvelously. I mean, Ken was literally like the son she never had, uh,
Mm,
biologically, and Ken was very giving to her, and any and every he made his time available for her. Uh, the shopping stories, they would go shopping after work, some because that's what she wanted to do. So
hmm hmm
he would go along to her little shoe addiction or whatever it was.
Well, John, thank you so much
Oh
for
yeah,
joining
sure.
us for this podcast and for
Yeah.
sharing your stories about Helen. And what a gift that you were able
Yeah.
to have that kind of relationship with her and interaction with her. And I know on behalf of course students everywhere, we're thanking you for motivating her to complete the psychotherapy supplement because that is
Absolutely.
a real jewel in the course canon, and we're so grateful for the all of the work that Helen has done, but I'm very glad that she completed
Well,
that
you
supplement.
guys, one of the things I've always admired about you, Robert and Emily too, knowing Robert for longer, you are a deep digger when it comes to the course. I so put you've made it your life, and you've worked hard to live it and to make it available for the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, obviously, I wasn't part of that original circle of people back then, but it's very notable how many people who had those connections with Helen and with the original dictation of the course and the aftermath stayed with it,
Oh,
for life. That really that says something.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, as you know, the more you do it, the more you realize it's true. You realize there isn't anything else one could possibly want to do.
Yeah.
Make money. I mean, of course, we all need enough money to through this world and to accomplish the things we need. But that great line, power, fame, money's physical pleasures, to whom do these things belong?
Yeah.
If that's all there is, then let's keep dancing. All
Yeah. Keep dancing. All right, John. Well, thank you,
right,
and
good
and
talk to you.
stay tuned for part two, where we're going to talk about John's girlfriends.
Okay, that's it. That's we're done. Okay. After that, I met my wife, and we'll let it go.
Thanks so much, John. We really appreciate your time.
Bye.